Africa must unite. The path to a united continent. Welcome to the African Unity Podcast, where we explore the historical vision, present realities, and future possibilities of a truly united Africa. Today, we embark on an insightful journey through the aspirations of African unity, what it means, why it matters, and how it can be achieved. Drawing from powerful speeches, historical moments, and the pressing needs of our time, we ask, what does African unity truly look like, and how can we bring it to life? The vision of African unity. African unity is not just a political ideal, it is a necessity for economic, social, and cultural progress. Many African leaders, especially during the independence movements, envisioned a continent where borders, imposed by colonial rulers, no longer divided us, but rather connected us as one people with a shared destiny. One of the most passionate calls for unity came from Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana's first president. He emphasized that Africa must unite under a continental government, not just as a loose coalition of independent states. His concern was that without true unity, Africa would remain vulnerable to external pressures, internal conflicts, and economic exploitation. But what kind of unity are we seeking? Is it a United Nations-style organization where resolutions are often ignored? Or a loose association where stronger states dominate weaker ones? Or should we aim for a genuine union where African nations work together for the common good, in the same way that the United States of America was formed? The urgency of unity, lessons from history. Throughout history, Africa has suffered from division and external interference. Colonial powers deliberately fragmented the continent to weaken it. The result, today African countries struggle with. Economic dependence. Many African economies still rely on exporting raw materials to former colonial powers instead of trading within Africa. Political instability, border conflicts, ethnic divisions, and foreign interference have made stability difficult. Lack of a unified voice. On the global stage, Africa is often treated as separate, weak entities rather than a powerful collective force. When the United States was founded, representatives from different states came together, not as Virginians or New Yorkers, but as Americans. They realized that only by forming a strong central government could they defend themselves, develop their economy, and become a global power. Can Africa do the same? The structure of a united Africa, a practical framework. If African unity is to succeed, it needs more than good intentions. It requires practical structures. A union government for Africa. Dr. Nkrumah proposed the creation of a union of African states, where all African nations would function as one entity. This would include a common foreign policy. African nations would speak with one voice on international issues. A continental defense system. Instead of fragmented military forces, Africa would have a unified military strategy to protect its sovereignty. A common economic plan. This would ensure self-sufficiency, industrial development, and an African common market to trade among ourselves rather than relying on external economies. A united African economy. Economic unity is key to Africa's progress. Imagine an Africa with a single currency, like the euro in Europe, which would simplify trade. A continental banking system to provide financial stability. Infrastructure projects. Roads, railways, and energy grids that connect Africa, making it easier to do business and develop industries. A shared African identity. Beyond politics and economics, unity must be cultural and psychological. This means African citizenship, where people can move freely across the continent without unnecessary restrictions. A common education system that teaches African history, values, and innovation, rather than relying solely on colonial curricula. Promotion of African languages, alongside global languages, to strengthen our identity. Overcoming challenges to African unity. While the vision of unity is compelling, the road ahead is filled with challenges. 1. National interests versus continental interests. Many African leaders prioritize their own nations rather than the collective African good. 2. External interference. Powerful foreign nations have economic and political interests in keeping Africa divided. 3. Internal divisions. Ethnic, linguistic, and religious differences often create conflict rather than unity. How do we overcome these barriers? Political commitment. Leaders must be willing to sacrifice some national power for the greater African good. Grassroots movements. African unity must not be just a government project. The people, students, workers, entrepreneurs, must drive the movement. Economic self-reliance. Africa must focus on producing goods for itself rather than being dependent on outside economies. A call to action. The next steps for Africa. So where do we go from here? African unity is not just a dream, it is a necessity for survival and progress. Here's what we must do. 1. Strengthen the African Union. It should move beyond just discussions and act as a real governing body. 2. Invest in African infrastructure. Roads, railways, and energy systems that connect the continent must be prioritized. 3. Encourage intra-African trade. More African countries must implement the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA. 4. Promote African cultural identity. Education systems should teach African values, and media should highlight African success stories. 5. Support African liberation movements. Africa must remain committed to supporting oppressed people across the continent. The future of Africa, a vision of unity. Imagine an Africa where no African nation struggles alone because we all stand together. Resources are shared wisely so that all Africans benefit from Africa's wealth. The world respects Africa as a powerful force because we have one voice, one economy, and one destiny. Africa must unite, not just in speeches, but in action. We cannot afford to wait. The time is now. Let's conclude with a powerful thought. African unity is not an option, it is a necessity. The world will not wait for Africa to get its act together. We must rise, unite, and claim our destiny. Thank you for tuning in to the African Unity Podcast. Let's continue the conversation. Subscribe, share, and take action for a united Africa. Final reflection. What steps can you, as an African or a supporter of African progress, take to contribute to African unity? Share your thoughts and join the movement. Until next time, stay inspired, stay united, and stay African.